Hello and welcome to Blythebury Business News, where today we're talking about Tower Resources, listed in London with a symbol of TRP, a market capitalisation of around £2 million. But in a new step for Blythebury Business News, we're not talking to a member of the company's management or the board, but we're talking to David Mirzai. David is Head of Research, Energy Research at SP Angel. David, welcome on the show. Now, on the 6th of December, you published a note, a piece of research about Tower, in which you said Cameroon was ready for the rig. Then on the 18th of December, the company announced, in fact, it had signed a contract for that self-same rig. I do want to talk to you about the rig and what that means for Cameroon, but for the benefit of the viewers, can you please start by giving a quick overview of Tower and where it sits and what it does?
Yeah, hi Tim, and obviously thanks for having me on. Tower's an AIM-listed oil and gas company, and it's got an undeveloped oil discovery offshore Cameroon, and that discovery offers the potential for it to have a fast-track development and bring in cash flow within a period of, let's say, 2 years. In addition, the company also has exploration acreage in Cameroon, in and around that existing discovery. Plus, it has a couple of frontier licenses, one in Namibia and one in South Africa. And both of those areas have recently seen large discoveries made by majors such as Total and Shell. Now, for Tower itself, the discovery it has offshore Cameroon, which is called the Enjini oil discovery, and that's in the Tali PSC, production share and license, should I say. For them, they have an existing discovery which was made 15, 20 years ago by Total. And what they've always needed to do is to go back and drill a well on this discovery, an appraisal well, just to test the resource volumes, to establish the commerciality, some sense of the flow potential of the reservoir. And from that information, they would be able to kind of press the button on the development. So that's kind of what we've been waiting for from this company. It's been the real build-up of the last 2 or 3 years towards getting an appraisal well drilled on the Enjini discovery.
Okay, I mean, good to hear you say there that there's almost a pathway to cash flow. I want to talk about the drill rig a bit more in a moment, but they're on Enjini. Can you give us a sense of this field's scale, its potential?
No, so you know, in terms of the biggest fields in the world, you know, it would seem quite minor. Your scale that you're looking for, discovered scale, somewhere in the region of 15 to 30 million barrels. But then there's upside potential as well, both with the field itself and surrounding that discovery. And that upside potential could be as much as 100 million barrels. So in all terms, it's a fairly commercial project, especially for a junior E&P company.
They've announced that they've got the contract for the rig. It's expected to be offshore Cameroon early next year, I believe, spring next year. What's next? What will Tower do once the rigs arrive? What will they be doing next?
Well, even before the rigs arrived, now that they have a rig slot in place for next year, what they'll try to do is, first they'll have to go back to the government. Their license has expired. Now, this doesn't mean they have to reapply. This just means they go back to the government and they say, well, we have a rig contract in place for next year. Can you give us long enough on our license extension to enable us to drill this well with this rig? And we think the government will be quite agreeing to this proposition, given that was the whole purpose of giving them the exploration license in the first place, was to get a well drilled on this discovery. So once you have a license extension from the government, what you can do is you can bring in partners. At the moment, they have discussions with funding partners who would like to be part of this well, who would like to be part of this potential development. But you obviously, you'll need to get the paper signed first. So we call it a documentation of a license extension. Once you have that documentation in place, hopefully in Q1 next year, you can sign further agreements with incoming companies who will come into the license and they will help fund this well. Now, in total, we have probably a cost of in and around $20 million for this well. Probably about $6 or $7 million of that has been paid up front in terms of Tower going out and getting rig pipes and getting some of the equipment it needs to drill this well. But that leaves probably another $13 or $14 million that it needs to fund the drilling of this appraisal well on the Enjini discovery. Now, what it will look to do is it will look to bring in a partner and it will look to give them part of its interest. At the moment, they have 100% interest in the license. What they'll try to do is farm down part of that license interest to an incoming partner. And in return, that partner will contribute towards the costs and they'll contribute in an outsized manner. So, for example, in my numbers, I have a company coming in and acquiring a 32% interest in the license, and in return paying $10 million towards the $20 million cost of the well.
Just to read it for the viewers, David, that's your personal assessment of what might be needed, what might be wanted, and what happens with a partner if a partner comes in. That's not something that the company stated. Yeah, sure.
Indeed.
Okay, let me just look at the valuation, because in the research note you published earlier on in December, you've given the company a valuation on its share price significantly higher than the current share price. What was driving that?
Well, you see, Tim, we have to make a number of assumptions when we consider what a company is going to do. So obviously, the first assumption I have to make is what the company coming in, what type of interest they will acquire and how much they will pay for it. Now, fortunately for me, in 2020 and 2021, Tower had released RNSs announcing that it was in talks with other potential farming members, and it was also able to put in those RNSs the terms of a farming deal. And that's effectively what I've done, is I've said, well, I think the company can match those deals that I've made in 2020 and 2021. And that's supported by the current commodity prices, which are higher than they were back then. But also crucially, there's the E&P sector as a whole, given the high oil prices of the last 18 months, have been able to pay down a lot of debt. You know, they're generating significant cash flows which weren't available in 2020 and 2021. And this should mean that we're in a better position now to complete the farm out deal than we were back then. Now, the next thing my valuation looks at is, well, what might a development look like? And I try and take a very conservative view of what a potential development might look like. Now, we've been talking about a phased development where the first phase of that development would be for 15 million barrels. That's 15 million barrels. And that's far below what their reserve auditors thought they have on the license and what their own internal estimates are. So I've used a pretty conservative estimate. I've used a conservative oil prices assumption of $60 a barrel. And then what I've also assumed is that of this $13 million that they have to pay towards the drilling of the well next year, that they will have to contribute maybe $3.5 million. And that $3.5 million will come from an equity raise that they will do in the first half of next year in and around where the share price is today. Now, if you put all of that together, that gives you a valuation of in and around $32 million for a risk project next year with a 68% working interest. And if you divide that by the number of shares post my assumed equity raise, that gives you 0.12 pence per share, which offers over 300% upside from the current share price.
300% upside. That's going to be encouraging for very many of the Tower shareholders, and some people might be looking at becoming Tower shareholders. Thank you for taking us through where we are offshore Cameroon. I can't let you go, though, David, without having a quick look at because there are other assets in the Tower portfolio, Namibia, South Africa. Very, very quickly, please give the viewers the benefit of what's there and what might happen with those.
Yeah, no, I mean, whilst we would obviously advise investors to initially focus on the opportunity set in Cameroon, if you look across the wider portfolio, there's significant exploration potential. Now, some of that comes from in and around the discovery they've got in Cameroon, where once they've got that development ball rolling and they're generating cash flows, you would expect them to explore the area around, where if they had any discoveries, they could tie that back to their existing development. But also, you've got 2 frontier licenses. You've got one in, just offshore Namibia in the Walvis Basin, and one offshore South Africa, just off to the southeast coast of South Africa, near where Total had recent large gas discoveries. Now, those are frontier licenses. They don't contain any oil and gas discoveries at the moment. To be fair, they've only drilled 1 or 2 wells on those entire licenses. But what you're looking for is well, if they can work up these licenses and establish that these licenses have billion-barrel potential, then that will attract a larger partner who might come in and agree to fund 3D seismic in maybe 2025, which would allow them to kind of hone their understanding of the acreage that they've got and potentially drill at a later date. Now, whilst we realise that it's very early stages at the moment, any progress towards bringing a farm in partner in and getting 3D seismic drilled in the following years is further upside for the company's investors, which we think should be considered in part, although it's not a core value at the moment.
David, thank you very much for that. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully we'll see you again on the programme. That was David Mirzai, Head of Energy Research at SP Angel, talking us through the recent news from Tower Resources on the contract for the rig being signed, that rig to go offshore Cameroon, and also giving us a sense of the potential of the rest of the Tower portfolio. And that brings us to the end of this edition of Blythe Business News. Thanks for watching.